for some other Jackalope features that don't get talked about frequently, and we'll go over those. I think we're going to start with you, Drew, talking about the LRS UI status. Do you want?
Yeah. Am I able to be presenter so I can see my screen?
Yep. One second. Okay, you should have a request.
All right. Let's do this. Okay, can you guys see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm going to give a brief status update on the new LRS UI. During last year's user group, we had a session where we looked at state DOT solutions for syncing data and line work with Jackalope. If you recall, Iowa, Kentucky, Missouri, Utah, and Wisconsin graciously were our presenters for that session. And the goal of that was to get some user input as we were in the early stages of building an interface that would automatically sync data and line work changes between Jackalope and the enterprise GIS system and alert the user when the change was made. We wanted to gain a better understanding about how line work and data changes were managed between enterprise GIS systems and various program areas with some of our users. And on my screen is a spreadsheet showing the greatest NFL football team and the states that are interested in the new LRS UI. We have Idaho, Nevada, Utah, and Wyoming. And on the left are the implementation steps. Looking at the spreadsheet, you can see where the states are at in the process. You can see with Nevada, we have completed all of the necessary tasks. And last month on September 23rd, Nevada did go into production with the new LRS UI. So my participation in this is working with you to identify the Jackalope fields that you'd like the LRS UI to interface with and completing a use case if needed. I'll work with you to make sure that Joe and your team are on the same page. So looking at the steps, we'll identify the roads and highways or GIS feature classes. We'll cross-reference the Jackalope fields to roads and highways or your GIS. We'll do an update of the key traffic data element workflow process. This is where it can really differ from state to state. For example, Nevada's workflow process had their data going from Esri roads and highways into a roads and highways geodatabase, excuse me, and then into Jackalope and the high desert traffic Jackalope database. Also, both databases fed data into a copy of the roads and highways HPMS layer file. The roads and highways layer files were used as the data source to update Jackalope. This was a manual process where their traffic coordinator reviewed sites from Jackalope and identified differences between Jackalope and roads and highways. When differences were identified, the roads and highways feature classes were used to update the Jackalope database. If needed, we'll do a use case of key traffic data elements. We did this for Utah. I know we talked about use cases in the past, but for those of you unfamiliar with them, they are a high-level document or diagram or both that help to identify system requirements when it comes to a specific business process. Then we have testing, sign-off, and implementation to production. And it's worth noting that these steps might be a little different for each state. This is a new module and not part of the Jackalope suite. We know the manual solution works, but it does take a lot of commitment. So I will lastly mention that the new UI carries a one-time cost of $5K. I am the contact person for the new LRS UI. So if you're interested, shoot me an email, give me a buzz, and we'll get the ball rolling and go from there. So that's all I got. Thank you very much, and I'll turn it over to Joe and Catherine.
Thanks, Drew. Drew, I won't let Cia see your Green Bay thing. Why don't you hear about it? She's a Bears fan, and yeah.
I won't hold it against her or Tony.
Well, that is her least favorite team. Like every other team she's okay with, but oh man, Green Bay. I don't know what it is about that team, but it inspires a lot of hatred. I don't know why.
It does.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Drew. And you said this, but I just want to highlight it. When we're talking about roads and highways synchronization UI, we're actually talking about any Esri data source. For example, in Nevada, they store their their stations aren't actually in roads and highways at all. They're in a separate I don't know what it is, a separate program, separate just set of layers called Trina. And so we get the stations from Trina, and then we actually access the roads and highways database to get the kind of the extra stuff. So just so you know, we use roads and highways terminology all the time, but really it means any roads and any ESRI ArcGIS publicly consumable layer. So next on the agenda, we're looking at a filling of the gaps feature, which really only works for Wyoming right now, because Wyoming is the only state that has section information in Jackalope. So in HPMS can actually work in two different modes. You're seeing a mode here that you normally don't see, which is what we call the route mode. And in the route mode, you have a couple, well, you have at least one additional piece of functionality that you guys don't normally see, which is the ability to estimate statistics along the route based on known collection points. So for example, if you got a long route and you got 5 permanent stations on that route, but then you got a whole lot of a great deal of sites between those sites, between those account sites that aren't counted in a given year, you can use this interface to essentially do a best fit curve, which is a statistical thing that sort of makes a curve among those 5 sites, and then estimates the resulting statistics and spreads them out along the uncounted sites, if that makes sense. Unfortunately, this takes a little while to load. I should have done this first, but oh. Sorry, I should have been better prepared. So the first step is you have to go to a particular statistic. So let's say we want to estimate K factors. And then you pick your route, which I already did, so now we're just waiting on it to load again. And Chad has this button, and you guys don't. And it's nothing personal. It's just that if you go over here in Wyoming, they have a segment program, which you could also technically use, where they can load their LRS segments from a file. And this used to hook directly into their GIS, and they could load their sections from their GIS, but that link broke at some point for some reason. But now Chad loads his segments from a CSV file, which works similar to the MEC CSV loader, where you can go through and pick your columns. And so he loads all of his segments here, and then he has a special tool that we wrote for him that allows him to snap his segments onto sections. So for example, if there's a minor road realignment and every milepost moved, like 1/10 of a mile or something like that, there's a tool in here that lets Chad relatively quickly go through and realign the segments with his traffic sections. And I'm not going to do a demo on that. That'll take a while. I was just filling time while this silly thing loads. Probably need to do some efficiency work in HPMS. Or maybe this is just a Chad thing because of the route. I don't know.
I think it's mainly the slow server it's on too. I don't think it's always as slow out in the world. Okay, so Chad is agreeing. Yeah, that
okay.
is.
This is SF. SF1 is, for some reason, just been super slow. We don't know why. It's a mystery. We need to replace both of those servers. Jeff's been bugging me about it. So unfortunately, I picked something that's already been run, but that's okay. I'll show you anyway. So basically what you do, this is the entire route. There's 24 stations on this route, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 continuous counters on this route, and then a whole lot of sites that don't have counts at all. And so what Chad can do and I'm saying Chad, but Eric, whoever's doing the actual HPMS stuff, can select the route and say fill statistical gaps. And right now what it's doing is it's going through and it's evaluating what's there and what's not, and trying to figure out the best thing to do here. This doesn't take too long. Unfortunately, it's not actually going to do anything because I've already done this once. The blue things there are the things that were automatically plugged based on this feature here. I'm going to use it all the time. How much time do you need, Kathy?
Probably like 10 minutes.
Okay. So along this route, so what you would do is you choose the input data, and the input data are grouped by what the final statistic type is. So there were eight sites here that actually had counts. And so we're going to use those as our input. We're going to use that to construct our curve. And then we're going to apply that curve to these 16 plugged sites. Normally this would say 16, null sites or something. I can't remember what it says, but it wouldn't have anything in there. But we did it this way just so you could, for example, plug information first and say, I know the K factor over here is going to be this, and I know the K factor over here is going to be that, and then use that as input data, the plugged, and spread that to the null sites. And yes, and then you would hit fill gaps, and it would go through, and it would end up looking just like this. You would have plugged data that so between this count site, which had a 15 K factor, and this count site had a 13 K factor, we're building that curve, and the curve said that's what these look like, the intervening K factors. And this is for any statistic type, any of the six HPMS statistics: K factor, D factor, single unit average, peaks, combo average peaks. So it's pretty cool, but it does require that you store your section information in Jackalope, and which is something we would have to work with you to do. Although it's pretty easy, you could just load it from CSV. If you have a file with all of your sections, you could load them in there, and then you too could use the cool fill gaps HPMS thing.
So Joe, that was a question I actually had. So if someone has created site groups that are designated as HPMS routes, you can view them in HPMS by those site group routes, correct? But the fill gaps doesn't work. And then also, before we move on from that question, Nicholas also posed a question in the chat.
So unfortunately, the fill gaps requires lengths, so it's not just
okay.
So that's why you can't just use a site group. A site group would have, and maybe we could kludge it, like if you had, how we have 3 different kinds of site groups. We have the standard, which is just a bunch of sites. We have the dynamic, which is where you set a rule and say, I want all sites that have an ADT of less than whatever. And then you have this route site group, which is what you're talking about, Catherine, where you have, it's the same thing as the standard site group. It's just a bunch of sites, but you order them. And you say, this site comes before that site, and this, so it's specifically for sort of HPMS sort of things like that. I mean, you could like kludge it and say like every site is a mile between every other site, and maybe that's good enough, and in which case we could make the curve thing work. But right now it doesn't work because we do need to know distances, and we have to have sections to know distances. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Nicholas had asked, if I select from the grid instead of continuous plugged sites as an input, would it overwrite I'm sorry, override the continuous sites as well.
It's funny, we were just having this conversation, Catherine and I,
Uh-huh.
last week. So yes, actually, but that was by design, and so this was designed a long time ago between Chad and myself. I don't remember how long ago, pre-COVID, and the original intent was exactly that. I guess you would. Oh, you could, if you wanted to, overwrite your input sites with output data. In theory, the output should look exactly like the input, but the reason is that it might not exactly look alike. There might be a slight difference, and you maybe want your entire section to be to fit that curve, even the input sites. So, but that's actually I'm sorry, I got distracted by messages. But that may be undesirable, honestly, I don't know. Catherine and I, based on the discussion we were having last week, are going to bug Chad for another call here soon. Because we need to make some things consistent. Maybe we're gonna take that functionality out. I don't know, based on what Chad wants. What did you mean, Chad, that this is the one headache for the module?
Slowness. I
Oh,
think he was referring to the slowness.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah, it was the slow. It's weird. When you have the summary table up there, which has all of the factors or all of the data in it, it loads up really quickly. But the individual data sets loads up really slow. It's odd.
Yeah, we can work on. I think we need to work on some efficiency stuff. So, and then Nicholas, actually, you're saying that would be good. So Nicholas is raising the example of if my continuous sites were down for 6 months, you might want to use them for input as well as overriding those values, because it's kind of a hybrid situation there. That makes sense. So going back, if you give us sections in that CSV file right here, basically we need the name, we need the route, and the direction if you're doing directional stuff, and that will populate your section table here. And I'm trying to remember. Okay, this is not site modelable. And then your sites need to link to this. So you have to have your sites, and I'm sure in Wyoming's case, this is true, but your sites have to have a route identifier in them as one of your site metadata things. So if you go to one of the Wyoming sites, yeah, they have route mile point naming convention, which would be another requirement. So you need sections, and then you need a way for us to know how your sites map onto those sections. So those are the pieces, and then you can use it. And of course, any metadata stuff we can help you with, because that is pretty intense.
Joe, is this a module that we have a one-time charge for also? Do we need to mention that? I think it's a minimal charge, but I do think it's
the work of loading sections or the site metadata stuff. I don't know. We've never talked about it. I mean, okay. This is just part of Jackalope. You mean are you talking about the fill statistical gaps? I mean, I think if they have the data, there's, it's there.
Yes, I wasn't really thinking of the gaps part as much as the route. I don't know. I thought there was some things.
Custom, and and this is pretty Wyoming specific. Like, I wouldn't think people would use the snapping interface just because they have a different situation and different setup. My guess is if someone wanted to use it, we would have to charge just because it would have to be customized for their thing. But in terms of like loading LRS segments and traffic sections, that's just an import from CSV. And it seems like this isn't filled out, but that's just part of standard Jackalope, I think. But if there's work, if we have to customize something for you guys, then obviously that's a different conversation.
Hey, Joe, the reason that's not working right there is because we're still working on the I, B, and D versus row.
Oh, yeah, the direction stuff.
Positive and negative, yep.
Right. Which it raises another thing is, so in Wyoming, they don't use the Peter Ender roadway direction designation. In their LRS, it's I for increasing, D for decreasing, and then B for both, I think. And that's what's broken right here, is we loaded the road direction and Peter Ender thing. So that's what we're working on with Chad on that. So anyway, yeah, this, I wasn't going to talk about snapping anyway. It's also kind of cool, I think, when it works, but not something most people do in Jackalope. Traffic section maintenance is still something most people have to do, but it's usually in your LRS. But we brought that into Jackalope for Wyoming. Let's see. Nicholas asked, so if I have this information already in the current site table for route Malpoint, is that ready to go through this process, or will that need to be somehow converted? So if you're so let me think about that. So in Utah, let me do this. I think if you have, is it Deb? Does anybody know? Or test?
It's test. I don't know that it's up, but
okay. Well, I think so. There's two pieces. That's probably really a very important piece. If you have route Malpoint in your site metadata already, that's good. But then you need to get the section information in there for, and you need to load section information. So we, because that's what drives that route interface. So that's, to answer your question, no, that's not enough. We also need traffic sections with each of your routes and stuff like that, and beginning and in mile points, so we know how long they are, which is kind of the big piece. Does that make sense, Nicholas? Yep. Okay. And then we probably just want to test it. You would be use case number 2 if you wanted to use this, and you know how these things go. Probably won't work the first time. We'll have to tweak something, but in theory, what I just said is true. Okay. Well, Catherine, you want to talk about virtual sites?
Sure thing.
Cool.
I have 2 answers also from previous discussions. Heard back from Stephen that we are not submitting TMG 2016 individual vehicle records. They only will be reading individual vehicle records when they implement TMG 2022. So I think if Rhonda's in the room, that was a misunderstanding from NatMec, that they were already reading those records from you all. So that means we're pretty much ready to go then on our next version round of release testing. And then soon behind that, Jeff will, go ahead.
I was just going to ask you, did he give you any kind of indication? Because when the TMG comes out, there's always a delay between what the TMG says and what TMAS accepts. Did he give any kind of indication when the version of TMAS will be? No.
Nope, he said they are working on it. So that's okay. In programming language.
Yep.
We don't know. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, just putting that answer out there. And then the other answer before I start my presentation is that this Joe, is the reason why there is so much hatred for the Green Bay team.
Gotcha.
Once that is removed from the Green Bay team, I believe
Ouch.
the hatred will go away.
Really?
Ouch.
I've confirmed that.
Yeah.
That has been confirmed.
Yeah.
You cut me deep, Shrek. You cut me deep.
Wow.
That's pretty funny.
Well played, Catherine.
Yeah, well played.
All right, enough. I don't want to see a beautiful picture of Jimmy G on your screen in the next session, okay?
Gotcha.
Okay, so virtual sites. We've added some extra functionality since its original creation. And so I thought I would go and show and explain the various ways that you can set up virtual site-ness. I'm in Wyoming. They happen to be a state using them. And initially, we had virtual sites where you could designate, you know, your lanes, directions, and roadway that make up the virtualness of the site receiving that data. So here, I'm looking at a site, and it inherits the data from site number 2, roadway. When you, let's say we were going to add another element to this site, it tells you that it's using what kind of rule it's using for that virtual site. So you can only then add the same kind of virtual site rule if there's already a virtual site rule set up. And that's just a distinction I was going to mention. What are the virtual site rules now? We have 3. Here's an empty site. It doesn't have any virtual site set up, so I'm going to demonstrate what you could set up. So when you click on a road element to fill out for the virtual site, you can put a site that you are going to inherit from. I'll just pick one. The road element for which you're going to insert for the virtual site, unless you're talking about site AADT. So we have rules for continuous. You're going to just copy continuous daily data, continuous or short term, which is daily data. And when you have those rules, what you have to do is insert the virtual site process, puts the data into the new site. And then if it is a continuous site, you need to run monthly on it, an annual on it, as if this site is just a regular site like any other continuous site. So you run the virtual site process on it, then you would need to go into every single month of the year and run the monthly for it, and that annual time, phase 1 on it. So then you've now got an entire year's worth of data for the site. The second kind that we added more recently, or actually last year upon request from, I think Minnesota's using it, and Chad had originally wanted to use this also. So site AADT, you can put in your site, and now you do not have the ability to copy in lane data because site AADTs do not use lane data. They only create negative direction, positive direction, and road AADTs. And then you have your operation. Do you add this site's AADT, or you may have a combination of a few things where then you also might subtract from the AADT for a site? Someone can tell me if they see it. I don't have my chat up, but if someone has questions. Okay, so that's already out there. You all have the ability to do site AADT copies. Coming in the next version that we're about to test and release is a new request from Chad, which is count AADT. And so here is the distinction, and here's why Chad wanted count AADTs. So a count, AADT will contain the count in addition to the underlying pieces of information that can be used for HPMS calculations. So in Chad's case, for class sites, he wanted count AADTs copied to a site so that when he ran phase 5 HPMS, then he was also getting the single unit and combo unit data in phase 5. So we added that, and this is new, coming soon. When you go to your process virtual site screen, now you will see the 3 different types of virtual site functions. So when you run it, you would have to, if you've got all 3 site cases, then you would need to run daily, and it would run your daily for you. Or if you're ready to do site AADT, it's selecting that, and count AADT, same thing. When you run the process, it creates a job in your job submitted screen, and it'll show the progress of the job just like it does. Yeah, we have a couple in here. So your job will show count AADT run, okay, site AADT run, and then I'm guessing if we found it, then there would be the daily, virtual sites daily run. That's it. I just really wanted to introduce the fact that there are 3 different types now, what the difference is between them, how to run them, and what is entailed when you run it for the daily, that it's not just done once, then you continue that site through as if it's a continuous site. Are there any questions? Okay, Nicholas, I have some continuous stations that are collecting ramps in additions. What type would I use to assign a lane? Yeah, so that would be, you would do the continuous short-term type. So you would go to your ramp site here in the site list, go into your road, create your rule, and then from the site where the data is collected, let's just say it's this, then you would pick what road element at that site receives the data. So you're saying it's a lane. So then at this site, EV positive lane 1 can become the road at your new location, and then you've got your AADT for the ramp. Is that what? Yeah. So you would set it up like this. Then you would run it. It would assign all of the data to that site for the entire year, and then at the end, you'd end up going into monthly. For the January month, let's just say, I don't think we have anything in here for, yeah. So let's pick a different month that might exist. And what you would do is, just a second, it's stuck. After you've run your virtual site process, you'd come into the monthly for the year that you've got, and you would do refresh from site. The system would see that that site wasn't in this screen to begin with when you ran monthly, but that site has continuous monthly or data for that month, and that site would appear in your grid, and then you could check mark that site or however many sites you have only, and resubmit just that handful of sites. I wouldn't want the ramp to act like a continuous count station. I just want the AADT. No, you don't want it to be considered a really long short-term count. Yeah, you would need to treat it like this. There isn't really any other way to just pull out one lane from a site. The only way to pull out just a single lane would be to make it the continuous type.
But if he just wants the AADT, can he just make it a, site ADT type of virtual site?
Well, it depends, not really, because if he's going to do, let's just do site AADT types, right? You only get, oops, it remembered what I had before. So hold on, let me just go to site list and just grab a different site, because site AADT only copies directions, 2 directions.
Oh.
And
Right.
so yeah, so then the distinction of pulling out that lane can only happen at that daily level. It doesn't know how to
count with the upcoming count ADT as well.
Yeah, yep. So because
count ADT do have lane-based ADTs. We just don't have it at the site ADT level.
Okay, I can't do that. So it's loading in that site's road elements right now. Okay, so at the count level, you can, do we, Jeff, in the room, calculate AADT by lane?
We have
Yes.
ADT by lane in the tables.
Okay.
Every
Okay,
road
so,
ADT at the count level, not at the site ADT level. You're right.
okay. So Nicholas, your solution could be then the count AADT for your new site, borrowing just the lane from the other site, or lanes, depending on how you want to put it together. Thanks, Joe.
Mm-hmm.
So virtual sites are kind of developing and becoming of interest. I don't know if Missouri is still in this room, but there had been a request from them at one point where Missouri wanted to do something where you are copying the bins by specific bin to a site. So at the point when that becomes a requirement for them, or they want us to work on that, it'll require a design meeting to figure out exactly what that looks like. What are you expecting for that process to be? So the use cases, I guess maybe it's a rest stop, and so on one of the roadways, only on one lane are trucks only, and so I guess the virtual site would just be the lanes from that part of the site, and then the other bins would go to the other part of the site. So then you have the true volumes for those 2 lanes. I'm guessing this. I don't know. I saw a picture. Yeah,
that's correct summary there, Catherine. We're only able to capture it on the re-entry ramp. Is the only spot we're able to catch traffic without tearing up our equipment. So trying to populate data for farther back in the rest area and just split it up by commercial and passenger traffic.
Yeah, so that'll introduce a new thing. So a new virtual site by bin or something. So, you're going to hit the plus, we're going to have the site, and then you're going to select what bins. Again, we'll have a design meeting with you and make sure that we're covering what it is that you're asking for. But as you can see, it sounds maybe a little easier than it's going to be to set up the interface part to do it. Yeah, and then are you going to want it at the daily level? So it's going to act like a continuous station? Or do you want to just do it at the end of the year count type level? Those will be just some of the discussion items that we'll have when we finally meet with you. Any other questions on virtual site stuff? Alrighty, I think. Then we're early by a bunch. We were gonna, session was gonna go till 9:30, so I don't know if we want to,
We talked about the synchronization UI. Does anybody actually want to see it? I've demoed it before, but if people want to see it, I could take time to do that.
yeah, we had made this long joke in case the Wyoming fill gaps thing did take a while. All right, so if someone is interested, Aaron.
Okay, cool. Is Chris in here? Do any Nevada peeps mind if I use your database to?
I haven't seen Chris in. Is anyone from Nevada here?
I think Stephen is in.
Well,
Helms.
I mean, I won't make any changes. If you don't mind us showing your data, that would be. I don't know where Chris is in his testing, so I don't want to mess up where he is, but I can make this a completely read-only sort of thing. So I don't mess with anything. Show.
Okay, I stopped sharing, so it can go to you now.
Okay. So, JNV prod. People are seeing my screen?
No, oh, it is, okay. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so the point of the synchronization interface, and again, we call it the Roads and Highways Synchronization UI, and it will not by default be turned on for you. And so that's something Drew talked about this a second ago. There's work to be done. This isn't just something totally plug and play. There's work to be done to get this set up. But once it's set up, you have the ability to essentially compare your sites in Jackalope to any ESRI ArcGIS layer. So I will quickly go over the confusing aspect of this, which is the site metadata. So what happens behind the scenes is, hold on. Nope, all right, that's fine. So they have a site ADT. Okay, so essentially, not many people probably play with this, but if you ever go to site metadata now, you're going to see more information if you have this set up. You're going to see this whole roads and highway column information bit down here, and it defines where this information is coming from. And it can either come from Jackalope or, again, roads and highways, which actually means any ESRI layer that's publicly consumable. And then, we set up what the endpoint is for those layers here. And so, like, for example, in Nevada, they actually have 3 different ArcGIS servers. And so we're pulling from different places to bring all this together. I mentioned earlier they're using a database called Trina, and that's where their stations are, which is not actually part of roads and highways at all. It's a completely different Esri resource. And so we will go through, we being Laura and myself, will go through and set all this up for you after Drew does all of his work figuring out what needs to happen. And then essentially what happens is we will go and find your sites one by one in whatever layer is appropriate, and we will find those sites' coordinates in their spatial coordinates, and then we will look up the other attributes that you want to have populated. And excuse me, I think there are, let me just show you an example. Drew did this and it came out really, really good. So this is the, where is it? I think it's in marketing. Here it is. So for example, Nevada, where's Nevada? So after Drew's done, there will be a cool Excel spreadsheet like this. But this essentially says, okay, we're going to get our stations from somewhere, and then we're going to fill out the county information from this layer here. We're going to fill functional class information from this layer here. And this gives us all the information we need to essentially create a link between Jackalope and your Esri database. And the end result of that is the population of this interface here, the Roads and Highway Synchronization UI. So we ran this, and I don't know what Chris has done in the meantime, but we ran this for all of his sites last week, or a couple weeks ago actually. And this is the output. So essentially what happens is you're going to get one or more rows per site where there are differences. And there could be a difference that exists, like for example, for this site 001002, the county name in Jackalope says is Churchill, and the county in Roads and Highways is county number 32. And I have no idea what that is, but it's not Churchill apparently. We will go up and we have logic in here that will look up and understand what county number 32 in Roads and Highways means and compare it to whatever the county is in Jackalope and know that it's different. So this is an example of where there's a difference between the two. It's possible that you might have things that are only in Roads and Highways, in which case you have the status of in Roads and Highways only. So one of his fields that he's interested is the ramp field, yes, no. So this site doesn't have that filled out at all in Jackalope, but in Roads and Highways, it's a no. So if we were to synchronize this, it would update the Jackalope ramp field, which is a custom field for Nevada, to be a no, and on and on and on. There's some that are only in Jackalope, and we split it out that way because you probably make decisions based on, well, I don't care if it's not in Roads and Highway. I don't want to change Jackalope. I don't want to make Jackalope a null, for example, if it's not in like this state-owned field right here for this site. Is in Jackalope as a Y, but it's not in Roads and Highways at all. So we're not going to want to like override Jackalope's Y with a null. So you'll do things like, well, I don't care if it's in Jackalope only, and you can turn that off. And now we're looking at sites where it's in Roads and Highways only, or a difference exists, and on and on and on. And so each of his fields here, I'm going to sort by field. So he has county names, so there's a bunch of counties that are different. Let's say still county name, lots of county names. Wow. We're going to go to page 20. Anyway, for each of your fields, you'll get this list. And then when it's all done, said and done, you can go through, not sure why that's not working, and select what you want to change. So this is intended to be completely manual. Like this is a gatekeep kept operation for now. So basically you have to make a decision of, yes, I want to change all these counties to match what's in Roads and Highways. And you would do that, you'd select them all, and you would say, synchronize all if you wanted to synchronize everything that's here, or just synchronize selected. You also have the ability to ignore these. Like if you're like, oh, I don't care about these counties, these are fine. You could select them and ignore them, and then they would no longer show up on the list. And eventually, you know, in the next version of this interface, we're gonna allow for the auto synchronization of attributes. So right now you've got to manually do this, but there might be certain attributes where you just don't care. Like I think, what's another one of those attributes? Well, I don't know, like speed limit or something. Maybe you don't care if speed limit is, you're not going to want to gatekeep speed limit. Like so in Roads and Highways, it's in 25 and it's not anything in Jackalope. You might want to automatically deal with this field every time it's synchronized. instead of having to go through and manually do this step. So that's what AutoSync is going to be. We just don't have it yet. We're going to have an interface that says, for this field speed limit, I want to just automatically synchronize. I don't care. I don't want to have to deal with it every time. But there are, a lot of time you are going to want to actually see what's happened. You don't know what's happening on the roads and highway side. Maybe someone just randomly deleted a whole layer now. You don't want all of your information just to go away or something like that. I think as part of our discussions, we decided it's best just to make sure that you, as the operator, had the final say, and that nothing automatic was happening just because there's too many potential ways this could go wrong. Something happening you don't know about on the roads and highway side, and then everything changing in Jackalope would be a bad thing. Let's see what else. We're currently, it's just using the network as of now. In roads and highways specifically, I don't know if this is a general Esri thing, but in roads and highways, they have this, I think it's called Time Machine, is that right? I don't know if there's a roads and highways expert in the room, but you have the ability to roll the network back to a certain day. Like, let's say you wanted to run this and update your Jackalope sites to the way they looked on January 1st of the year. Like if you're doing annual processing and you wanted to make sure that Jackalope looked like, or these fields look like they looked on the first of the year instead of, now. You could, eventually we're going to implement, you could use, instead of using the current state of roads and highways, you can use the state as of a certain date. And then all these changes would be against that date's stuff. So that's a future thing. And so that's the quick and dirty demo of this. And again, if people are interested, Drew talked about the method to get this going. There is a lot of upfront, generating this stuff, and there's a lot of detail here. Like, for example, we need to understand, like, we have this cool domain page that says, well, that 32 that I said I don't know what that is, that's somewhere here. So that's Mineral County in Nevada. I don't know if you guys can see that, but we have to know this information to be able to interpret when Roads and Highways says 32, we need to know what that matches in Jackalope. So there's a lot of upfront work that has to be done, and Drew's done a great job of getting all that organized. So that's step one if you're interested in looking at this, is talking to Drew, like he says. Any questions? All right, I didn't talk slowly enough. So we're still a little bit early. Should we just break at this point and come back at 9:45 Pacific?
That sounds good.
All right.